To understand the grip of the Circleville letters, look at the community where they landed. Circleville, Ohio is an isolated Midwestern town. Here, social capital is built almost entirely on your family legacy and your public reputation. On the surface, it projects civic innocence, known internationally for its autumn pumpkin show. But that wholesome exterior made it exceptionally vulnerable to paranoia. By the late 1980s, the convicted letter writer, Paul Fresher, sat in maximum security solitary confinement. Wardens stripped his access to paper, pens, and envelopes. Despite those extreme security measures, hundreds of toxic, anonymous letters continued to arrive in Circleville mailboxes. This map shows the logistical problem for investigators. Paul is locked up in the Lima Correctional Institution, but every new letter is postmarked 90 miles away in Columbus, Ohio. Years later, a forensic sweep of those exact prison-era envelopes produced an impossible result. Technicians recovered Paul Freshour's latent fingerprints on the paper. An inmate in solitary confinement cannot physically touch letters mailed 90 miles away. This contradiction fractures the official legal narrative, forcing us to examine how this terror campaign operated and weaponized a town's deepest secrets. The campaign began a decade earlier, in 1977. The first wave of letters targeted a local school bus driver named Mary Gillespie, accusing her of maintaining an extramarital affair with the district superintendent. To understand the writer, we look at their highly specific linguistic profile. They relied on jagged, block capital printing to mask their natural handwriting, and erratically substituted standard punctuation with colons. The board also highlights a deeply alarming detail. The writer identified Mary using the number 62917. That was her official school bus employed member, a highly restricted piece of administrative data known only to a few district insiders. The psychological pressure eventually boiled over on August 19, 1977, when Mary's husband, Ron Gillespie, received a brief, provocative phone call at his home that sent him into an immediate rage. According to his children, Ron grabbed his .22 caliber revolver, declared he was going to confront the letter writer once and for all, and sped away in his pickup truck. 50 minutes later, Ron's truck collided with a tree at a high rate of speed, killing him instantly from massive internal trauma. The resulting death investigation was plagued by critical oversights. Sheriff's deputies found Ron's recently fired revolver directly beneath his body, but they failed to secure the crash scene, neglected to search the surrounding brush for bullet casings, and never explained why the weapon had been discharged. Instead, the coroner hastily ruled the death a drunk driving accident. Law enforcement's failure to adequately investigate the circumstances of Ron's death created an investigative void. With no police pressure, the writer escalated their operations from malicious gossip to attempted murder. On February 7, 1983, Mary Gillespie pulled her bus over to dismantle an obscene handmade sign along her route. Behind it, she discovered a loaded .25 caliber semi-automatic handgun secured to a cardboard box, rigged with a twine tripwire to fire at whoever pulled the sign down. Bureau of Criminal Investigation technicians successfully restored the weapon's filed-off serial number. They traced the gun directly to Paul Freshour, Mary's brother-in-law. To secure a conviction, the prosecution relied on a controversial handwriting analysis. As we see in this split-screen comparison, the sheriff instructed Paul to directly copy the exact text and format of the original letters. Experts argue this forces a suspect to emulate the target style, generating a perceived match. Furthermore, an evidence checklist shows the state lacked physical evidence. Technicians found 0 fingerprints belonging to Paul on the gun, the cardboard box, or the twine. The 1983 trial also completely omitted critical exculpatory evidence. Investigators had recovered mismatched shoe prints at the crime scene, and a witness spotted a yellow El Camino parked at the trap site shortly before Mary arrived. Paul Freshour did not own a yellow El Camino. However, the vehicle perfectly matched one owned by the brother of his estranged wife, Karen Sue, who was engaged in a bitter divorce proceeding with Paul at the time. This suppressed evidence brings us back to the prison paradox. Criminologists proposed 2 ways Paul's fingerprints ended up on the Columbus letters. Either he pre-wrote the letters before his arrest and an accomplice mailed them, Or a framing operative accessed his personal papers and discarded household materials to fabricate the mailings while he was locked away. By ignoring contradictory footprints, ignoring alternative vehicles, and relying on forced handwriting samples, the state prioritized a swift conviction over identifying the actual architect of the booby trap. When former FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole reviewed the letters, she concluded the author suffered from a severe personality disorder. The writer was driven by an obsessive need for power, absolute domination, and a perverse gratification in terrorizing their victims. That extreme psychopathology clashes entirely with Paul Freshour's documented history. Friends and co-workers consistently described him as a stable, non-violent manager who displayed absolutely none of those required behavioral traits. In the later years of the campaign, the writer's perspective shifts. While early letters use the singular, "I know where you live," the text eventually adopts a collective identity. "We know what kind of car you drive." This shift suggests the Circleville writer became a useful mask for multiple actors. Once the persona achieved notoriety and successfully disrupted the town, the block letter style provided a template for others to settle local scores, while maintaining the appearance of a single, inescapable syndicate. The mailings eventually stopped in 1994, but the campaign had already dismantled the town's mutual trust. Circleville became a community that utilized the veil of anonymity to systematically tear itself apart.